Alright everyone, I want to thank you all so much for watching this video here along US-95 between Tonopah and Hawthorne, Nevada, also featuring parts of US-6. So yeah, I mentioned that this stretch of US-95 is by far the most desolate stretch of US-95 in Nevada. As you can imagine, the drive between Las Vegas and Reno between US-95 is definitely one of the most desolate stretches of road in the United States, with this particular stretch here between Tonopah and Hawthorne being 100 miles with no services. And as you can see, we just passed through a whole lot of nothing here on this stretch of US-95, and that's been a recurring thing with these videos here along US-95 through Nevada, is you just basically pass through a whole lot of nothing between Nevada's two largest population centers. I also mentioned in the video that Tonopah, Nevada is literally one of the most isolated towns in the United States. You literally have to drive anywhere between 80 and 168 miles, depending on which direction you leave Tonopah by road, without any services whatsoever. And this area of Nevada is one of the few places in the United States where you can be as far away from a Walmart, a Costco, a Starbucks, a McDonald's, you name it. This is definitely one of the emptiest parts of the United States, and you should always take precautions whenever you travel out here that there will be not a lot of services and very limited cell phone reception. But even though this area is very isolated, it almost adds to the beauty of this drive in my personal opinion. The views of the White Mountains here along this stretch of US-95 and US-6 as you leave Tonopah are a sight to behold. And as you can see, I also filmed this video in April and July of this year, and what a difference 3 months makes. Back in April, you could see all of the snow up there on the White Mountains, including White Mountain Peak and Boundary Peak, and then by July, just 3 months later, all of the snow has melted. I personally really love driving through the middle of Nevada during the spring when all of the snow is on the mountains. It just really adds for a very picturesque and amazing drive through the Silver State, in my opinion, because the views of the desert mountains with the snow on them are just really amazing and just really add to the driving experience out here in the middle of nowhere. I personally love desert driving, and even though there's not a lot of snow on the mountains here when I film this particular stretch of road here in July, it still really adds to the driving experience because Nevada has by far the most mountain ranges of any other state in the US, with over 300 named mountain ranges. And as you can see from these various clips that I'm showing you when my grandpa and I drove out here in July, there's still quite a bit to see here if you actually take the time and get off the road here and just look at all of the historical markers, and if you actually take the time to check out some of the small towns out here in Nevada, such as Tonopah and Hawthorne, you can actually find quite a few hidden gems of things and roadside attractions like that along this stretch of US-95. So it's not just a whole bunch of empty desert, even though that's what most of this video probably looks like it is. So if you really look hard enough, you can actually find a number of historical markers and points of interest, such as Boundary Peak here, as well as other hidden gems that you might not have known about by not watching this video or doing your research. So I highly encourage you to do some research while you're on these types of trips in the middle of nowhere, because you never know what you're going to find or run into. Alright everyone, I just want to give a shout out to all my social media accounts that you see on the screen here, because I really am trying to grow my social media accounts beyond just here on YouTube. I would really appreciate it if you guys would check out my Instagram. I'm really trying to grow that social media platform, so I would really appreciate it if you guys would follow me on there. My username is just InterstateKyle. What's really cool about my Instagram is if I'm on a road trip, I will post on my story of where I am and what I'm doing, so it's just a really cool way for you guys to follow along with me in real time to see what I'm doing and what I'm up to. I know my videos on here can get pretty dated very quickly, so if you guys want to see what I'm doing in real time, I highly recommend checking out my Instagram, and I would really appreciate your support over there. You guys can also check out my Facebook group and my Twitter/X account. The links to all those are down in the description. Another thing I want to give a shout out to is my Patreon, which is a way for you guys to support me beyond YouTube here. If you guys want to join my Patreon, you guys can get special perks for joining, like watching all of my videos early before they are released here on YouTube. And all the money I make on there goes right back into this YouTube channel to keep producing more of these types of videos in the future. The link to my Patreon is also down in the description, so if you really want to check it out, I would really appreciate your extra support over there as well. And another thing that is set up on my channel is Super Thanks, which is located to the right of where you would normally like one of my videos. What that basically is just a way for you guys to tip me out for each video going forward if you feel that I've earned it, of course. And then all the money on there also goes right back to this channel to keep producing more of these types of videos in the future. And with all that said, folks, I really hope you all enjoyed this ride here along US 95 between Tonopah and Hawthorne, Nevada. I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you all have an amazing day, and take care, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned to the next adventure.